The massive arena shook with the deafening roars of thousands of aliens. High above, the banners of the Zarkith Dominion fluttered, a reminder of the Empire's brutal rule. The air smelled of sweat, blood, and something worse. Fear. At the center of the arena, a monstrous cage rattled as the creature inside slammed against the metal bars. The exhilarating beast, a towering nightmare of muscle and teeth, let out a bone-chilling snarl. Its glowing red eyes scanned the crowd, waiting for its next victim. The Zarkith warlords sat on their thrones, watching with amusement. This was their tradition, testing the strongest warriors of different species against their most feared beast. None had ever succeeded, none had ever tamed it. And today's challenger, a human girl. Ava Carter stood in the middle of the sand-covered battlefield, looking small and fragile compared to the horror she was about to face. The crowd erupted in laughter, mocking her. Some aliens threw things at her, calling her weak, calling her foolish. "She will last seconds," one warlord sneered. "She won't even get a chance to scream," another chuckled. Ava ignored them. Her eyes remained locked on the moment the supreme warlord gave the order. The arena exploded into chaos. Guards rushed toward Ava, their weapons drawn, their armored boots kicking up dust as they surrounded her. The Zarkith warlords watched from above, their faces pale with shock. This wasn't just about a human girl anymore. This was about control. If the Tyrak, their most feared weapon, could choose its own master, then the balance of power in the galaxy had just shifted. And that was something the Zarkith Empire could not allow. Ava saw the soldiers closing in, their rifles aimed at her head. She could see it in their eyes. They didn't fear her. They feared what she had done. They feared what it meant. But she wasn't afraid, because she wasn't alone. The Tyrak beast, once the Empire's ultimate killing machine, was no longer theirs to command. It let out a deep, thunderous growl, stepping in front of Ava like a living shield. The guards hesitated, their fingers tightening on the triggers. No one had ever faced a Cyrak and lived. No one had ever stood before one without being torn apart. And yet this human girl stood beside it, untouched. The warlords barked orders from their thrones, their voices filled with rage. Shoot her, kill the beast. Ava's heartbeat slowed. Every instinct in her body screamed to run, to hide, to fight. But she didn't need instincts anymore. She had something stronger. She had trust. The first guard raised his rifle. The moment his finger twitched on the trigger, that Exhilarating moved. Faster than anyone thought possible, the beast lunged forward. Its massive claws slammed into the ground, sending a shockwave through the arena. Dust and debris flew into the air, blinding the soldiers. The Cyrak's tail lashed out, striking 3 of them at once and sending them crashing into the walls like broken dolls. The crowd erupted in screams. Panic spread like wildfire. The Zarkith were powerful. Their armies were vast. But they had built their empire on control. And now, that control was shattering. Ava didn't waste time. As the beast fought, she moved. She sprinted toward the nearest exit, her mind racing. There had to be a way out. There had to be a way to survive. More guards stormed in. Energy blasts filled the air. The Cyrak roared, dodging and weaving, its massive body somehow graceful as it avoided the deadly beams. But it couldn't hold them off forever. Ava had to act. Then she saw it, an opening. A heavy gate at the far end of the arena, partially raised from where the beast had smashed against it earlier. If she could get there, she might have a chance. The problem? It was blocked by at least 20 armed soldiers. Ava clenched her fists. She had come this far. She wasn't going to die here. She turned to the Cyrak. The beast locked eyes with her, as if it understood what she was thinking. "Go," she whispered. And the Cyrak obeyed. With an earth-shaking roar, it charged. The soldiers barely had time to react before the monster was upon them. It slammed its massive body into their formation, scattering them like leaves in a storm. Some tried to fight, but their weapons were useless against something this powerful. Ava ran. She sprinted toward the gate, dodging fallen bodies and leaping over wreckage. The exhilarating fought beside her, clearing a path with brutal efficiency. For the first time in her life, Ava felt something she hadn't felt since being taken by the Zarkith. Hope. The gate was just ahead. She was so close. And then, a blast of energy struck the exhilarating in the side. The beast roared in pain, stumbling forward. The shot had come from above. One of the warlords had personally taken aim, firing a high-powered plasma cannon. Smoke rose from the exhilarac's wound. It wasn't fatal, but it was enough to make the creature falter. Ava froze. The Supreme Warlord stood from his throne, his golden armor gleaming under the artificial lights. His reptilian eyes burned with fury. "You think you can escape?" His voice echoed across the arena. "You think a mere human can defy the Empire?" Ava glared up at him. "Looks like I already have." The warlord snarled. "Then you will die here, like the rest of your kind." More guards poured into the arena. Too many. The exhilarating was strong, but it was wounded now. It couldn't fight them all. Ava's mind raced. There had to be another way. She couldn't just run. She had to change the game. And then she saw it. Above the arena, mounted into the walls, were the beast cages. Hundreds of them. Dozens of Sirak, just like the one beside her. The Zarkith had collected them, imprisoned them, used them as weapons. But now they were Ava's army. She sprinted toward the nearest control panel. The guards saw what she was doing and fired. She ducked, rolled, and slammed her hand onto the release switch. A deep alarm blared through the arena. Metal doors hissed open. Chains snapped. And then, the cages shattered. The Xerac were free. The arena turned into a battlefield as massive, enraged beasts stormed out of their prisons. The Zarkith soldiers screamed in terror as the creatures tore through them, fueled by years of captivity and rage. The Supreme Warlord's face twisted in horror. Ava turned to the Xerac beside her. "Come on," she said. "We're getting out of here." The beast lowered itself. Without hesitation, Ava climbed onto its back. And as the Zarkith Empire collapsed into chaos, a human girl and her beast made their escape. The arena was in chaos. The once mighty Zarkith Empire, feared across the stars, now faced an unstoppable rebellion. And it all started because of one human girl. Ava gripped the thick fur of the Xerac as it thundered forward, dodging blaster fire. Behind her, the massive beasts she had freed were tearing through the Zarkith soldiers, their rage unleashed after years of captivity. The Supreme Warlord had disappeared from his throne, barking orders to his guards. But Ava knew he wasn't her biggest problem anymore. Her problem was getting out alive. The Xerac beneath her was wounded. She could feel its breathing growing heavier, its powerful muscles trembling slightly. It was hurt, but it still ran. It still fought. It was fighting for her. Ava leaned forward, speaking softly. "We're almost there. Just a little more." The beast let out a low growl, as if it understood. They were heading for the main gates, a set of enormous blast doors that led out of the arena complex. If they could get past those, they'd be free. But the Zarkith weren't about to let that happen. From the towers above, turret cannons whirred to life, their barrels glowing with deadly energy. Ava barely had time to react before the first shots slammed into the ground, sending debris flying in all directions. The Xerac dodged left, narrowly avoiding a direct hit. The ground behind them exploded, sending a shockwave through the arena. Ava's heart pounded. They wouldn't survive another shot. She scanned the area, looking for a way out. And then, she saw it. A cargo transport was parked near the gate, its engines still humming. It was heavily armored, designed to carry the Xerac to different battlefields. If she could reach it, she might be able to use it to break through the gates. But there was a problem. The transport was on the other side of the battlefield. Ava clenched her jaw. No choice. She leaned forward, "We need to go fast." The Xayrak growled in response, then bolted forward with terrifying speed. Blaster fire rained down from above, but the beast was too fast. It leaped over fallen debris, crashed through enemy lines, and plowed through anything in its way. The Zarkith soldiers panicked. They had never seen a human command a Xayrak like this. Some dropped their weapons and ran. Ava didn't care. She had one goal. The transport was just ahead. The ramp was open. But before they could reach it, a massive armored figure dropped from the sky. The Supreme Warlord himself. His golden battle armor shimmered under the bright arena lights. His reptilian eyes burned with fury, and in his hands he held a massive plasma blade, its energy crackling with deadly power. "You will not leave this place, human," he snarled. That Xayrak skidded to a halt, growling low. Ava's mind raced. She was so close. But the Supreme Warlord was no ordinary soldier. He was faster, stronger, deadlier. If she fought him head-on, she wouldn't stand a chance. The Warlord took a step forward, gripping his plasma blade tighter. "This beast belongs to the Zarkith," he said, his voice dripping with rage. "And so do you." Ava clenched her fists. "Not anymore." The Warlord charged. The plasma blade sliced through the air, coming straight for Ava. At the last second, the Xayrak lunged forward. Its massive claws clashed against the Warlord's blade, sending sparks flying. The impact sent shockwaves through the arena. The crowd, what was left of them, watched in stunned silence. The Supreme Warlord fought with the strength of 100 soldiers, swinging his blade in deadly arcs. But the Xayrak was just as fast. It dodged, weaved, and struck back with terrifying precision. Ava knew this was her only chance. She slid off the Xayrak's back, hitting the ground running, straight for the transport. The Warlord saw her move and snarled. With a mighty roar, he punched the Xayrak aside, sending the beast tumbling across the ground. Then he turned to Ava. Too late. She was already inside the transport. She slammed her hand onto the control panel. The engines roared to life. The Supreme Warlord's eyes widened. No. Ava grabbed the controls and slammed the transport forward, straight into the blast doors. Boom. The doors shattered, metal flying in all directions. Sunlight poured into the arena for the first time in years. They were free. Ava turned to the Xayrak. "Get in." The beast, bruised but not broken, leaped inside just as Ava hit the thrusters. The transport shot forward, leaving the ruined arena behind. The last thing Ava saw was the Supreme Warlord, standing in the wreckage, his face twisted in fury. But he didn't chase her, because he knew. The galaxy had just changed forever. And it was all because of one human girl. The transport raced through the wastelands outside the arena, kicking up dust as its thrusters burned at maximum power. Ava gripped the controls, her heart pounding. They had escaped, but they were far from safe. The Supreme Warlord would never let this go. The Xayrak lay curled up in the back of the transport, its deep wounds still bleeding. It had fought for her. It had nearly died for her. Ava clenched her jaw. "I won't let them take you back." But then, a sharp alarm blared through the cockpit. She glanced at the scanners. Multiple red blips appeared on the radar. Zarkith pursuit ships. They had found her. Ava gritted her teeth and pushed the engines harder. The transport roared forward, but it was a cargo hauler, not a fighter. The Zarkith ships were built for speed and war, and they were closing in fast. A voice crackled through the speakers. "Human," the Supreme Warlord's voice boomed, filled with cold fury. "You have taken what belongs to the Zarkith. Surrender now, and I will grant you a swift death." Ava smirked. "No thanks. I like the long version." The Warlord growled in response. "So be it." The pursuit ships opened fire. Bright plasma bolts streaked through the sky, exploding just behind Ava's transport. She jerked the controls, swerving hard to avoid the blasts. But the old hauler wasn't made for evasive maneuvers. She couldn't outrun them. Ava's mind raced. Think. Think. She scanned the landscape ahead. Mountains, jagged rock formations, deep canyons. Ava grinned. If she couldn't outrun them, she'd outsmart them. She pushed the transport toward the canyons. The warlord's voice returned, mocking. Nowhere to run, human. You are only delaying the inevitable. Ava ignored him. The transport shot into the canyons, weaving between towering cliffs. Plasma fire rained down, blasting apart rock formations. One wrong move, one mistake, she'd crash. The exhilarating let out a deep, worried growl. Yeah, I know this is crazy, Ava muttered, gripping the controls. But crazy was all she had left. The Zarkith ships followed her in, but they weren't built for tight spaces. One fighter clipped a rock too fast. Boom! It exploded, crashing in a fiery wreck. Ava smirked. That's one. But she wasn't done yet. She pushed deeper into the canyon, narrower and deadlier the further she went. More ships followed. Another Zarkith pilot tried to keep up, but his ship's wings scraped a rock wall, sending him spiraling. Boom! Another explosion. Ava laughed. 2. The Supreme Warlord's voice snarled through the speakers. You amuse me, human, but this ends now. Ava's heart dropped. The largest Zarkith warship appeared overhead, its massive cannons glowing. One shot from that thing, and she was dead. The exhilarating growled again, sensing danger. Ava swallowed hard. No escape. And then, her eyes locked onto something ahead. A deep chasm, a tight squeeze, but just wide enough for the transport to fit. Barely. She didn't think. She didn't hesitate. She pushed the throttle to max. Straight for the chasm. The warlord's voice returned, amused. You cannot escape, human. Ava didn't answer. She just held on tight and dove into the abyss. Ava's knuckles turned white as she gripped the controls, forcing the transport into the tight chasm. The jagged rock walls rushed past, so close they nearly scraped the hull. Behind her, the Zarkith warships hesitated. The chasm was too narrow for them to follow easily. But Ava wasn't safe yet. The transport rattled and groaned, alarms blaring. She was pushing it too hard. The exhilarating let out a deep, uneasy growl. Ava glanced back. It was watching her, its massive claws digging into the floor, sensing her desperation. Hold on, she muttered, her heart pounding. And then, a new alarm blared. Something was closing in fast. Ava's eyes snapped to the radar. A Zarkith fighter had followed her in. It was smaller, more agile, built for speed. And it had missiles locked on her. She gritted her teeth. Nowhere to run, nowhere to dodge. A voice crackled through the speakers, the Supreme Warlord himself. You are trapped, human, he sneered. Your courage is meaningless. You will die here. Ava ignored him. She had one chance. The chasm was ending. Up ahead, the walls widened into a massive underground cavern, filled with towering crystal formations and a deep abyss below. An idea formed. A crazy one. She flicked a switch. The ship's cargo doors began to open. The exhilarating snapped its head up, sensing something was about to happen. Ava took a deep breath. Trust me, she whispered. And then she jumped. She yanked the controls back, cutting the engines for a split second. The transport tilted upward, stalling midair. And in that brief moment of weightlessness, the exhilarating leaped out. The Zarkith pilot had no time to react. 1 second, he was locking missiles. The next, a monstrous black shape slammed onto his fighter, tearing through metal like paper. The exhilarating ripped the cockpit open with its massive claws, roaring with fury. The Zarkith pilot barely had time to scream before the exhilarating crushed him in its jaws. The fighter spiraled out of control, crashing into the abyss below. Ava's transport lurched back online, engines roaring. She banked hard, skimming over the abyss, watching as the exhilarating landed gracefully on a rocky outcrop. She held her breath. Would it come back? For a moment, the exhilarating stood still, staring at her with its burning yellow eyes. Then, it crouched low and leaped. It soared through the air, landing back in the transport's open cargo bay with a heavy thud. Ava hit the controls, slamming the cargo doors shut. She grinned, breathing hard. You really are incredible, aren't you? The exhilarating rumbled, its eyes watching her closely. But there was no time to celebrate. The Supreme Warlord's voice returned, laced with fury. You will regret this, human. You have no idea what you've done. Ava smirked. Yeah. Then maybe you should stop underestimating me. She punched the thrusters, and the transport roared out of the cavern, heading straight for the surface. The hunt wasn't over. It was just beginning. Ava barely had time to catch her breath as the transport shot out of the cavern and into the open sky. The night stretched endlessly above, but the reprieve was short-lived. The Zarkith fleet had not given up. Alarms blared as scanners detected multiple warships closing in fast. Ava clenched her jaw, her hands tight on the controls. She had expected pursuit, but not this quickly. The Supreme Warlord's threat still echoed in her mind, and now she understood. He was willing to throw everything at her just to take the exhilarating back. The beast rumbled behind her, its massive body shifting uneasily, as if sensing the incoming danger. Ava knew she couldn't fight the fleet head-on. The transport was sturdy, but no match for a full military force. She needed a plan. Fast. Then, an idea struck. If the Zarkith wanted the exhilarating so badly, maybe she could use that against them. Flicking a switch, she activated the ship's long-range comms. A secured frequency, one that only a certain human warship would be monitoring. This is Ava Carter. Any Terran forces within range, I am under attack by Zarkith warships. I have something they really don't want us to have. If you want to turn the tide, now's the time to move. She cut the transmission and prayed someone was listening. But there was no time to wait. The Zarkith ships were closing in, surrounding her. The lead warship broadcast a message. Surrender the beast, human. You do not understand what you have unleashed. Ava let out a dry laugh. Oh, I think I do, she muttered. Without warning, she geared the ship toward the storm clouds rolling in over a mountain range below. If she couldn't outrun them, she'd have to outthink them. The transport dived into the raging storm, turbulence throwing her against the seat. Lightning cracked through the sky, illuminating the jagged cliffs below. The Zarkith followed, but hesitated. Ava could tell they weren't as comfortable flying in unstable conditions. She pushed the ship lower and lower, weaving through the mountains, skimming over rocky peaks. Then, a flash of movement on her radar. Not Zarkith. Something bigger, something human. Ava's heart pounded as a colossal Terran dreadnought burst through the storm clouds above. Her distress signal had worked. The ship's comms crackled to life. This is the TSF Revenant. We got your signal, Carter. Hold tight. We'll take it from here. Relief surged through her, but the battle was far from over. The Zarkith realized their mistake too late. The dreadnought's main cannons roared, tearing through the enemy fleet with brutal precision. The sky lit up as explosions rocked the storm, Zarkith ships breaking apart under the relentless assault. Ava pulled up, escaping the chaos as human fighters swarmed in, finishing what she had started. The Supreme Warlord's voice returned, but this time there was no arrogance, only rage. You have doomed yourself, human. The exhilarating is not a weapon you can control. Ava glanced at the beast, which sat calmly now, watching the destruction unfold. That's where you're wrong, she said, because it chose me. The Supreme Warlord's ship retreated, vanishing into the void. The battle was won, but Ava knew this was only the beginning. The Zarkith wouldn't stop. They would come back. But now, humanity had something they never expected, the loyalty of a creature they feared most. And she would make sure they never underestimated her again. The battlefield was quiet now, the burning remains of Zarkith warships drifting in the void. The Terran dreadnought hung in the stormy sky like a silent guardian, its presence a reminder that humanity had answered the call. Ava exhaled slowly, her hands still tight on the controls. The battle was over, but the war, that was just beginning. The exhilarating, once a beast of terror, now sat behind her, calm, steady, watching. Its piercing golden eyes locked onto her as if waiting for something. She could feel the tension in the air. It wasn't fear. It wasn't rage. It was a decision being made. Then, slowly, the exhilarating did something no one had ever witnessed before. It bowed its head toward her, a gesture of submission. No, a sign of loyalty. The Supreme Warlord's warning echoed in her mind. The exhilarating is not a weapon you can control. Ava realized now how wrong he was. The exhilarating was not a weapon to be controlled at all. It was a force to be respected, trusted, and unleashed only when necessary. And now it had chosen humanity. The comms crackled as the TSF Revenant's captain spoke. "Carter, we need you to dock. Command wants to see this thing for themselves." Ava hesitated. She knew what that meant. The exhilarating was no longer an enemy, but an asset. The Terran military would study it, experiment on it, maybe even try to replicate its abilities. Could she allow that? The exhilarating let out a deep growl, but there was no hostility in it, just understanding. It, too, knew what would come next. She made her decision. Negative, Revenant. I'm taking the exhilarating somewhere safe. Silence on the comms. Then, the captain's voice. Lower now, more cautious. "Ava, you know what you're doing." No, she didn't, but she knew what she had to do. She shut off the beacon, cut communications, and veered the ship away from the dreadnought. The exhilarating let out a low, approving growl as if it, too, understood the gravity of her choice. She wasn't handing it over. Not to the Zarkith, not to the Terran High Command. It was free now, and she was going to keep it that way. The Revenant didn't fire. Maybe they understood. Maybe they trusted her. Or maybe they were just too stunned to react. Ova pushed the engines to full power and vanished into the dark void of space. The legend would spread. The Zarkith's greatest nightmare had not only survived, it had sided with a single human girl. And if the galaxy thought this was the end, they were wrong. This was only the beginning.